Althea Ramos thought she had mastered the art of living two lives, one as a humble maid, serving Dubai's elite, and another as the secret mistress of three powerful sheikhs, who promised her a life beyond imagination. But when jealousy, pride, and power collided, her glittering double life turned into a deadly trap. Behind the luxury and lies, Sheikh Khalid al-Masri's rage, Sheikh Hamdan al-Ziyad's betrayal, and Sheikh Nasser al-Rami's vengeance would ensure that Althea's final journey ended not in wealth, but in the endless silence of the desert. Althea Ramos had arrived in Dubai 2 years earlier, a quiet young woman from Quezon City, carrying only a suitcase, her passport, and the hopes of lifting her family out of poverty. Her days followed a strict routine: early mornings, hours of housework, evenings spent in silence in her small maid's room. To her employers, she was polite and invisible, a model domestic worker who never complained and always smiled. But behind that smile was exhaustion, loneliness, and a longing to escape the life that seemed designed to keep her in the shadows. On her rare day off each week, Althea would visit a small cafe tucked between luxury boutiques in the heart of the city. It was there, on one of those slow Friday afternoons, that her life began to shift. A wealthy businessman, Sheikh Khalid al-Masri, noticed her. He was drawn to her simplicity, her quiet presence, and her refusal to beg for attention the way others did around him. What began as small gestures, paying for her coffee, offering rides, slowly evolved into something dangerous. Althea knew it was wrong, but she convinced herself it was harmless. For the first time, someone looked at her as more than just the help. Soon, Sheikh Khalid began providing her with small gifts: an iPhone, gold earrings, expensive perfume. It was more than she could have ever dreamed of, and it came with one simple rule: secrecy. Althea learned to keep two lives, separate the obedient maid in the villa and the mysterious woman who disappeared into the glittering nightlife of Dubai. She became skilled at deception, lying about errands, changing clothes in public bathrooms, and keeping her phone hidden under her pillow at night. Every text from Khalid filled her with equal parts thrill and fear. But Althea's double life did not end there. Through one of Khalid's friends, she met Sheikh Hamdan al-Ziyad, a charismatic investor known for his charm and recklessness. Their affair began in the same way: flattery, gifts, and whispered promises. To Hamdan, she was a beautiful secret in a world of luxury and control. For Althea, he represented freedom, a way to climb out of the limitations that had defined her existence. She told herself she was in control, that she was just playing the game everyone else played. But what she didn't realize was that every new connection brought her closer to danger. By the time Sheikh Nasser al-Rami entered her life, Althea was no longer the naive girl who once scrubbed marble floors in silence. Nasser was older, colder, and vastly more powerful than the others. He treated affection as a transaction, using his wealth to control those around him. Althea knew this, but allowed herself to be drawn in. Each of the three men believed they were the only one. Each promised her protection, luxury, and love, and each would later feel betrayed when they discovered she was seeing someone else. Her world became a web of carefully timed lies and overlapping schedules. On Monday nights, she dined in secret with Khalid at a private apartment he rented for her. On Thursdays, she met Hamdan at a hotel where no one knew her name. Weekends were reserved for Nasser, whose attention came with both glamour and silent intimidation. Althea told herself she could manage it all. She even sent home large sums of money to her mother, who believed her daughter had found a high-paying office job. But in Dubai, rumors traveled faster than the desert wind. One careless photo, one gossiping friend, one suspicious glance from a bodyguard was all it took for the cracks to appear. Althea began noticing small signs: a driver watching her too closely, unfamiliar cars near her apartment, a phone call that went dead after a single ring. She tried to convince herself it was nothing, yet deep down, she knew she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Her story was no longer one of escape, but of survival. She had built her life on secrets, and in a city that thrived on power, secrets had a price. What Althea didn't know was that one of the men had already discovered her betrayal, and while she continued to chase a dream of freedom, a plan was already being formed in the shadows, one that would end her story not in luxury, but in tragedy. Althea's life had become a performance, a delicate balancing act between three powerful men who unknowingly shared the same woman. To survive in a city built on status and appearances, she had learned to adapt quickly, smiling when she felt fear, pretending to be in control when in truth, she was walking through a maze with no exit. Every lie she told deepened her entanglement, and every promise she made was a thread that could unravel at any moment. Sheikh Khalid al-Masri, the first man in her secret life, was becoming increasingly possessive. Known for his temper and obsession with control, Khalid began to notice changes in Althea's behavior: missed calls, vague excuses, sudden disappearances. He had spent years building an empire that demanded loyalty and respect, and the idea of being deceived by someone of lower status wounded his pride deeply. He began to doubt her, though he said nothing at first. Instead, he quietly hired a private investigator to follow her. At the same time, Sheikh Hamdan al-Ziyad was showering Althea with more attention and gifts than ever before. He saw her as an escape from his own structured, high-pressure life. To him, Althea's simplicity and warmth were addictive. He moved her to a small but luxurious apartment under a different name and insisted that she quit her maid's job. Althea resisted at first, fearing it would draw attention, but the temptation of comfort and freedom eventually won. She quit her work discreetly, claiming to her employers that her family needed her back home. In reality, she was trying to keep her three worlds from colliding. But Dubai's elite circles were small, and secrets were difficult to hide among men who all moved in the same powerful network. A mutual acquaintance of Sheikh Khalid and Sheikh Hamdan mentioned seeing a Filipina woman matching Althea's description. At a private hotel dinner with Hamdan, Khalid's suspicions grew stronger. The investigator he had hired soon brought back photos grainy, time-stamped, and undeniable. Althea was seen entering a hotel with Hamdan late at night and leaving the next morning. Dressed differently, Khalid's pride turned to rage. He didn't confront her immediately. Instead, he began digging into her past, discovering the trail of gifts and money transfers that linked her to yet another man, Sheikh Nasser al-Rami. Nasser was a name Khalid knew well, a man feared more than respected, known for his unforgiving nature and deep connections to law enforcement and politics. The realization that Althea had been seeing all three of them wasn't just humiliating, it was dangerous. When the truth reached Nasser, his reaction was far more calculated. He saw Althea not as a woman who betrayed him, but as a liability. In his world, reputation was everything, and scandal could destroy an entire dynasty. He couldn't allow whispers of being outsmarted by a maid to reach the public. He summoned two of his most trusted security men and ordered them to watch her closely. Meanwhile, Althea sensed that something was changing. Calls from Khalid grew shorter and colder. Hamdan became more distant, distracted by business meetings and unexplained absences. Even Nasser, once indulgent and affectionate, had turned quiet, his messages curt and formal. The walls around her were closing in, but she didn't understand just how tightly. She began feeling watched in marked cars near her apartment, a stranger following her through a shopping mall, a phone call where no one spoke on the other end. Fear started to eat at her confidence. The glamorous life she had built was cracking, and the safety she once felt from her lovers had turned into suspicion. In a desperate attempt to keep her world intact, Althea decided to meet with Nasser privately, hoping to calm whatever storm was brewing. She believed she could explain everything, convince him that she was loyal, that the rumors were false. She didn't know that by the time she made that decision, the three men had already spoken. A meeting was planned not with her knowledge, but about her. The powerful Sheikhs, once rivals in secrecy, were now united in anger. To them, Althea was no longer a lover. She was a threat to their pride, their power, and their reputations. What followed was not an argument over betrayal, it was the beginning of a plan to make sure her secret life would never reach the light of day. The desert outside Dubai was vast, silent, and merciless. To outsiders, it looked like endless beauty, a horizon of gold under the sun. But for those who understood power, it was also the perfect place to make things disappear. That was where Althea Ramos was invited one weekend by Sheikh Nasser al-Rami, who promised a private retreat, away from stress and gossip. The invitation seemed sincere, even romantic, and Althea accepted it with cautious hope. She wanted to believe things could return to how they once were, before suspicion and fear had replaced the illusion of luxury. The car that arrived to pick her up was a black SUV with tinted windows. The driver introduced himself simply as Amir. He was quiet throughout the journey, barely glancing in her direction. Althea sat in the back, staring at the skyline fading behind her as the city dissolved into the emptiness of the desert. Hours passed before they reached the secluded Camp White tents, a few luxury vehicles, and guards stationed at a distance. It looked like a royal getaway, the kind used for exclusive parties among the elite. Sheikh Nasser greeted her with a calm expression, but his eyes were unreadable. Something about the atmosphere felt wrong. There were too few people for such a large setup, and the silence was heavy. Althea noticed no sign of music, laughter, or any of the luxuries she was used to at his gatherings. Instead, she was told to rest and that dinner would be served later. She tried to relax, convincing herself that this was just another of his strange habits. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply. The camp was quiet except for the faint hum of a generator in the distance. Althea stepped outside her tent, gazing at the stars scattered across the black sky. For a moment, she felt peaceful until she noticed something moving far beyond the lights of the camp. Two shadows, standing still, just at the edge of the darkness. When she turned back toward the tents, the generator cut off suddenly, plunging everything into silence. The next morning, the camp was empty. The guards were gone, the vehicles vanished, and Althea was nowhere to be found. When the driver Amir returned to the site later that day, he found nothing but tire marks in the sand and a single handbag half buried near the fire pit. Inside were Althea's passport, her phone, and a gold bracelet with the initials AR. The rest of her belongings were missing. Her disappearance went unnoticed for several days. Her employers assumed she had gone back to the Philippines. Her friends thought she had finally left Dubai for good, maybe with one of her lovers. It wasn't until Ronnie Avelos, her roommate, filed a missing person report that police began looking into it. The investigation started quietly, but once authorities realized the names connected to Althea, the tone changed. Officers were instructed to proceed carefully. They traced her last phone signal to an area near Sheikh Nasser's private camp. When questioned, he denied any knowledge of her visit. His statement was polished and cold, claiming that he had ended all contact with her weeks before. The police found nothing substantial at first, just footprints erased by wind, and a few scraps of burnt fabric. There was no body, no struggle, nothing that screamed foul play. Still, something felt wrong to the investigators. The more they looked into Althea's life, the darker it became. They uncovered her connections to multiple high-profile men, her sudden resignation, and the large sums of money transferred to her bank account shortly before she vanished. Behind closed doors, whispers began circulating within Dubai's elite, rumors of a woman who had played with the wrong kind of power and paid the ultimate price. Officially, the case was labeled as missing under unknown circumstances, but among those who worked in the investigation, the unspoken belief was that Althea Ramos had not simply disappeared. She had been erased. Somewhere beneath the desert sand, her secrets lay buried, along with the evidence of a crime that no one dared to name. Weeks after Althea's disappearance, the case began to fade from the news cycle, overshadowed by other stories and buried under political silence. But one man couldn't stay quiet: Amir Kader, the driver who had taken her to the desert that night. He was restless, plagued by guilt and fear. He had followed orders, never asking questions, but something about that night haunted him. The silence in the desert, the look on Althea's face when they arrived, and the sudden disappearance of everyone the next morning, it all felt wrong. He knew that what he had witnessed wasn't a vacation gone wrong. It was something darker. Amir finally decided to speak when police approached him again, this time with more pressure. Investigators had found traces of Althea's belongings, and her last known location pointed directly to Sheikh Nasser's private property. Amir's confession came slowly, trembling under the weight of the truth he had been hiding. He admitted that he had been ordered to drive Althea to the camp and leave immediately after dropping her off. He said there were 3 cars already there when he arrived, one belonging to Sheikh Khalid and another to Sheikh Hamdan. He remembered seeing Althea's reflection in the window of the SUV, nervous and unsure. but she never spoke a word. Amir said he waited on the outskirts of the desert that night because he had been told to return once the guests were gone. When he came back hours later, the camp was deserted. The tents were half collapsed, and the sand showed deep marks of vehicles that had left in haste. He found Althea's handbag near the fire pit, her phone buried under sand as if someone had tried to hide it. A few meters away, he noticed something else: ashes, mixed with fabric and metal. At first, he thought it was trash, but then he saw something small glinting in the sand. It was a gold bracelet engraved with AR. That was when he realized she wasn't coming back. His statement sent shockwaves through the investigation. Detectives returned to the site, this time searching every inch of the area. They found burnt fragments of clothing, a single earring, and what appeared to be pieces of bone mixed with ash. Forensic teams worked quietly under heavy supervision, testing everything they could recover. After several days, the DNA results confirmed what everyone feared: it belonged to Althea Ramos. The news spread quickly, igniting outrage across the Filipino community in Dubai. Social media was flooded with calls for justice, and journalists began digging into the identities of the three sheiks. Their names were whispered in online forums and newsrooms, but none dared to print them openly. Those who tried found their stories pulled within hours. The power surrounding the case was too strong, and the silence from authorities only deepened suspicion. Meanwhile, Sheikh Nasser held a press conference, coldly expressing sympathy for Althea's family while denying any involvement. He described her as a former acquaintance who had left Dubai months earlier. His tone was detached, professional, and almost rehearsed. Sheikh Khalid and Sheikh Hamdan made no public comments, but both disappeared from social events and went quiet in the media. Investigators tried to gather more evidence, but everything began to crumble. Security footage from the desert road was mysteriously lost. The phone company records linking Althea to the Sheikhs vanished from the database. Even Amir's official statement was removed from the police archives within weeks. Those who worked on the case received anonymous warnings to stop digging. Despite the silence, the story refused to die. It became a ghost case, whispered among workers, journalists, and those who had once known Althea. Her name became a symbol of fear, a reminder of how easily a person could vanish in a city built on power and wealth. The truth had surfaced for a moment, only to be buried again deeper than the desert itself. But for Amir Kader, there was no peace. He lived in constant fear, believing he was being followed. He told a close friend that he had done something unforgivable, that he had seen too much. 2 weeks later, he was found dead in his apartment, hanging from the ceiling fan. The police called it a suicide, but no note was found. Those who knew him doubted he had taken his own life. It seemed that one by one, every trace of the truth surrounding Althea's fate was being erased, leaving behind only questions that would never be answered. The discovery of Amir Kader's body marked the final blow to what little hope remained for justice. In Althea Ramos's case, with his death, the only living witness who had dared to speak out was gone. Officially, it was declared a suicide, and within days, the investigation was quietly closed. Files disappeared, evidence was sealed, and the case was labeled as inconclusive. But to those who had followed the story closely, it was clear that the truth had been buried along with Amir. The powerful had once again silenced the weak, leaving behind only fragments of a tragedy no one wanted to claim responsibility for. In the Philippines, Althea's family received the news in shock. Her remains were sent home in a sealed coffin, accompanied by a brief letter of condolences from the authorities and an envelope filled with money. It was enough to buy a small house and secure her younger siblings' education. No one knew who had sent it, but the family understood. It was hush money payment for silence. Her mother wept quietly, refusing to open the envelope, keeping it hidden under her bed as a painful reminder of the daughter she had lost to a world that didn't value her life. The media coverage in Dubai was tightly controlled. Articles that mentioned her name were swiftly deleted. News anchors avoided the topic altogether, and local police issued short, sanitized statements that made the case sound like an unfortunate disappearance, rather than a brutal crime. Even foreign embassies stepped back, unwilling to challenge the system. Within a few months, Althea Ramos became just another forgotten name, a woman erased from the city she had once served. But among the community of foreign domestic workers, her story became legend. They whispered about her in shared dormitories and crowded buses, warning each other not to trust promises of wealth or love. They said her ghost still roamed the desert, searching for justice that would never come. Some believed that the money sent to her family was not a gift, but a curse, a reminder that the truth always comes with a price. Behind the polished doors of luxury palaces, the three men responsible for her fate continued their lives untouched. Sheikh Khalid al-Masri, whose anger had started the chain of events, quietly relocated to his estate in Abu Dhabi. Sheikh Hamdan al-Ziyad sold his shares in a major investment firm and disappeared from public view, rumored to be living in Europe. Sheikh Nasser al-Rami remained in Dubai, unbothered, his reputation still intact. His influence ensured that no one dared to speak his name in connection with the case again. For years, there was silence. Then, an anonymous letter appeared at a small news outlet in the Philippines. It contained copies of bank transactions, photographs, and a short message written in neat handwriting. She was never supposed to die. The journalist who received it tried to investigate, but found themselves followed by unmarked cars and shadowed by men who never spoke. Within a week, the publication withdrew the story. The evidence vanished once more, swallowed by fear and power. Over time, Althea's story faded into myth, a cautionary tale of greed, secrecy, and betrayal. Her family tried to move on, clinging to the idea that she was in a better place. But her mother never believed the official version. Every night, she lit a candle by the window and whispered her daughter's name, as though calling her spirit home. Years later, construction workers building a new resort in the desert stumbled upon a buried metal bracelet, still intact despite the harsh sand. The initials engraved on it were AR. The workers turned it into authorities, but the item was never logged into evidence, and its location became unknown. It was as if the desert itself was trying to speak, trying to reveal what had been hidden for so long. In the end, Althea Ramos's death was more than a tragedy. It was a symbol of how truth bends under power. Her story was silenced by money, erased by influence, and forgotten by those who feared to remember. Yet somewhere, beneath the dunes of Dubai, her secret remains, a reminder that even the most carefully buried sins leave traces behind, waiting for the day when the wind will uncover them once again.